It started with little things. A delay in his replies. A sudden rush out the door claiming team dinners that didn't include photos or stories, just vague smiles and a phone that never left his hand. We worked in the same building, just on different floors. But somehow, we felt worlds apart. His phone was always face down now, locked tighter than a vault. And that warmth in his eyes when he looked at me? It was dimming. I wasn't sure what had changed, but something had. Then came the whispers. Not from him, of course, but from the office. Overheard elevator chatter, a slip of a name. Ashley. Young. New. Too close. People said they were always laughing a little too much in meetings, lingering a little too long near the elevators. I'd hear her name like an echo in passing conversations. But I kept my expression calm, like none of it reached me. Internally, though, I was listening to every word, every shift in energy. I didn't accuse, I didn't cry, I didn't even ask. If something was happening between them, I knew the truth would show itself, eventually. I've never believed in screaming matches or tears at desks. I believed in observation, patience, strategy. If he's hiding something, I told myself, I'll find out the right way. And deep down, I already knew. I just needed the pieces to fall into place. The distance grew heavier with each passing week. He started staying late more often, casually blaming it on a new project or team deadlines, but his stories didn't hold up under light. He never mentioned names, no details, just broad strokes of corporate excuses. And when I asked if he wanted me to drop by for lunch, he always had a reason to say no. The excuses were polished, too polished, like someone rehearsing a script they no longer believed in. I noticed how careful he became with his phone, how he'd tilt the screen away, silence it mid-message, even take it to the shower. The same man who once left his inbox wide open on our couch now guarded every notification like it held state secrets. There was a tension in his shoulders he tried to hide, a flicker in his eyes when my questions got too close. He wasn't just lying. He was unraveling, and trying desperately to look composed while doing it. I started paying closer attention, not out of desperation, but clarity. I watched patterns, noted the nights he stayed late that aligned too perfectly with her floor's events. The small talk from coworkers turned into silent glances. The office had its own way of speaking, through rumors, timing, and energy shifts. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. I could feel it in my gut, in the silence that used to be filled with love. Something was already broken. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of them in the lobby. Too close to just be colleagues, too familiar in the way they smiled at each other. He didn't see me, but I saw enough. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm like it was natural, like she'd done it before. That laugh. It wasn't the kind you hear in meetings. It was the kind people save for after hours. And right then, I realized I wasn't imagining anything. I was witnessing it. But I didn't flinch. I kept walking, heels steady, heart hammering. Rage wasn't useful yet. I needed clarity, not chaos. I went back to my desk, answered emails, scheduled meetings, and replayed the image in my mind like a film I needed to study frame by frame. I didn't want a confrontation. I wanted understanding. I wanted the full picture, clear, undeniable. So I started watching everything from the top floor, where emotions don't cloud judgment. Because here's the thing. Betrayal is loud, even when no one says a word. And once you learn how to listen, really listen, the truth comes faster than you think. I didn't go looking for proof right away. But when the gut feeling stops being a whisper and starts screaming in your ear, you learn to trust it. I began small, just monitoring calendars, comparing schedules. That's when I noticed a pattern. Same conference room, same time, different meeting titles. Ryan and Ashley always seemed to coincidentally need the same space. Not once. Not twice. Enough to feel deliberate. It was almost insulting how sloppy they were. I checked our internal message system, saw innocuous exchanges with suspicious timestamps. And then came the Instagram stories, Ashley's little breadcrumbs, blurry wine glasses, dim lighting, a hotel bar I recognized from a company retreat. She never tagged anyone, but the clues were all there. One night, she posted a quick shot of a city view. That same evening, Ryan texted he was stuck in traffic. The skyline matched. I didn't even have to zoom in to know he was lying. But the confirmation came quietly, wrapped in something so ordinary it felt surreal. Netflix. We still shared an account. At 9:47 p.m., a device pinged from a hotel across town. Some romantic comedy autoplaying. I wasn't the one watching. That's when the ache hit hard, not just the betrayal, but the insult of it. He was comfortable enough to use our shared logins in a hotel with someone else. And that, somehow, was what made it real. No more doubts, just clarity. I didn't cry. Not that night. I sat in bed with my laptop on my knees, staring at the continue watching row like it had betrayed me too. I felt hollow, like the breath had been knocked out of me but my body hadn't caught up yet. There's a strange calm that comes with certainty. It's not peace, but it's close. And in that stillness, I decided I wouldn't fall apart. Not for him, not for this. I wouldn't let his choices define the end of my story. That next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. I wore the lipstick he once said made me look too confident. Good, let him feel it. I said good morning to people I barely spoke to, smiled more than usual, and from my floor, I watched them. Not obsessively, strategically. If I was going to act, it had to be with precision. No accusations, just quiet collection. Let him think I was naive. Let her think she'd won. But here's the truth, no one tells you. When a woman is silent, she's already building something. A boundary, a plan, a reckoning. And I was building mine slowly, methodically. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted control. If I was going to leave, it wouldn't be with shattered dignity or unanswered questions. I'd walk out when I was ready, on my terms, and with the kind of exit no one could ignore. I started saving things, screenshots, calendar overlaps, the way their lunch breaks started syncing up like clockwork. I even made notes, timestamps, subtle behaviors, missed calls that lined up with Ashley's stories going live. It felt like watching a performance from behind the curtain, where all the illusion fell away and the truth stood naked. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was sharpened, focused. Something inside me had shifted, and there was no going back. At work, I kept my tone light, my posture easy. I laughed in meetings. I hit every deadline. But inside, I was stitching together a narrative they didn't know I was writing. Every digital trail, every lie he told with a casual shrug, every moment he underestimated me, I gathered them like threads. I wasn't just his girlfriend. I was his colleague. And he had forgotten that part. That mistake would cost him. I didn't want to make a scene. I wanted to leave a mark. The kind that doesn't erupt, it echoes. I wasn't going to scream in his face or beg for answers. No, I'd wait. I'd let it unfold naturally, under fluorescent lights and formal emails. Because if I had to endure this betrayal, I'd at least make sure I walked away with more than just closure. I'd walk away holding the pen. Most people at work didn't know my title carried weight. I wasn't flashy. I didn't flaunt connections. But I'd spent years climbing, one smart move at a time. And while Ryan was busy chasing flirtations on conference calls, I'd been building something real. What he didn't realize was that I wasn't just another employee. I was 2 doors away from the VP of HR, someone who'd seen my work, trusted my instincts, and who didn't take policy violations lightly. So I began my case. Quietly. thoroughly. I gathered everything: time-stamped emails, calendar overlaps, building access logs that showed them leaving together long after hours. I even included witness statements, colleagues who'd seen the two of them grabbing drinks, ducking out of company events early, sharing private jokes in team settings. I wasn't bitter, I was deliberate. Every piece of information had to be irrefutable, professional, clean. Let the facts speak for themselves. Then I found something even bigger. Ashley was referred by Ryan. At first, it looked harmless, just a name on a referral line. But when I checked our internal policy, it was crystal clear. Romantic involvement with a referred hire without disclosure, violation, favoritism, grounds for disciplinary action. Suddenly, this wasn't just personal, it was corporate. He hadn't just broken my trust, he'd broken the rules. And that gave me leverage, the kind that couldn't be ignored. I didn't rush. Timing mattered. Emotion couldn't bleed into this. It had to look clinical by the book. I drafted the report with precision, organizing everything like a lawyer preparing for trial. I attached the emails, the access logs, screenshots of internal chats. Even the hotel Netflix login, absurd as it was, had a place in the appendix. I didn't write accusations. I wrote observations, patterns, inconsistencies. And I let the story build itself through evidence. I knew how these things worked. HR doesn't act on rumors, they act on documentation, and mine was airtight. But the beauty of it all? I never had to raise my voice, not once. While Ryan thought he was getting away with it, I was already 5 steps ahead, drafting a future where I didn't just walk away, I walked taller. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoring something he tried to take from me, my dignity. I walked into the VP's office one morning with a folder in hand and a calm smile. She greeted me like always, warm, professional. She didn't expect what I handed her. I said it simply, "I thought you should be aware of this." No drama, no trembling voice, just facts. She nodded once, opened the folder, and began to read. I didn't stay to explain. I didn't need to. I knew I'd said enough, and now it was her turn to act. That afternoon, I returned to my desk like it was any other day. I answered emails, signed off on reports, joined a video call with a client in London. But under it all, there was a pulse, a quiet satisfaction humming beneath my calm exterior. No one knew what had just been set in motion. Not Ryan, not Ashley. They were still laughing 2 floors below me, unaware that the ground was shifting under their feet. I watched the office like a strategist surveys a battlefield. HR worked quietly, always has. There'd be no public spectacle, no dramatic outbursts. Just polite calendar invites and private conference room doors closing with soft clicks. That's how it's done. And when it starts, it's fast. I knew that. I also knew I wouldn't be informed of every step, but I didn't need to be. I'd already done my part. The machinery was running now, and so I waited. Not with tension, but with certainty. This was no longer a guessing game, no more gut feelings or half-truths. This was a process, professional, precise. And soon, the consequences would catch up. Not just with Ryan, but with the version of him that thought I was too soft, too trusting, too blind to notice what was happening right under my nose. It started quietly, just like I expected. A few closed-door meetings, some nervous glances. The air in the office changed. You could feel it, even if no one said a word. HR doesn't move until they're ready, and when they do, it's swift. I saw the first signs in Ryan's posture, shoulders stiff, jaw tight. He wasn't joking around with his team that morning. He barely looked up from his screen. Something had reached him, and it rattled him. Later that day, he was called in. The email landed like any other, but I recognized the sender. I'd sat in that same office with that same HR lead for entirely different reasons. Promotion reviews, strategy sessions. Ryan, though, walked in with the energy of a man who knew he'd been caught but was still hoping it might all blow over. I didn't watch him go. I didn't need to. But I knew the moment the interview began. Everything slowed. Then came Ashley. She looked surprised, unprepared. Security met her before she reached the HR floor. Not loud, not cruel, just firm, professional, final. She was escorted out before lunch. No announcement, just absence. A desk left in limbo, and no one dared ask why. The silence was louder than any office gossip. Ryan came out an hour later looking smaller somehow, like his suit didn't quite fit him anymore. By the time the news reached the rest of the office, it had already lost its shock. No one was surprised. That's the thing about secrets. They leak long before they're exposed. People whispered behind their coffee cups, pretending to be shocked. But I saw the knowing in their eyes. They'd noticed too. The flirtations, the late meetings, the slip-ups. No one said my name, but they all looked at me differently now, with a quiet respect. Ryan wasn't fired, not officially. But he might as well have been. His title was stripped, his projects reassigned, his calendar cleared. The access badge that once opened half the building was reprogrammed to a single wing. He no longer sat in executive briefings. No more travel. No more clients. Just spreadsheets and damage control. He kept his head down. He didn't come near me. And honestly, that silence was louder than any apology he could have offered. I walked past his desk that afternoon. He didn't look up, but I saw his screen, an empty inbox blinking, no new meetings scheduled. I smiled softly to myself, not out of cruelty, but because something had finally shifted back into balance. There's a power in knowing you didn't have to raise your voice to be heard. That sometimes consequences arrive not with fireworks, but with quiet, irreversible decisions made behind polished office doors. I returned to my desk with a fresh coffee and a calm heart. No one said a word, but I could feel their eyes. Not with pity. No, that moment had passed. What they saw now was control, composure. I answered emails, sent off a quarterly report, even laughed on a call with a longtime client. My world hadn't ended. It had recalibrated. And the best part? I hadn't stepped out of line once. I'd played by the rules. He hadn't. I passed Ashley's empty desk on my way to the break room. Her chair was still slightly pulled out, like someone had left in a rush. Her plant remained on the windowsill, wilting. It struck me as poetic in a way. Something brought in with so much energy now left behind to rot in sunlight. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. That space, like the relationship they tried to build behind my back, had already died on its own. People underestimate quiet women. They mistake our stillness for passivity, our calm for weakness. But I've learned there's strength in subtlety. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I delivered consequences in silence, wearing heels and a polite smile. And Ryan? He learned the hard way that betrayal doesn't always come with a slam of the door. Sometimes it walks right past you like you don't even exist. That night, his message came in like a final flicker from a dying match. Why would you do this? 4 words, no punctuation, no apology, just bewilderment, as if I'd blindsided him. I stared at the screen, almost amused. He still hadn't figured it out, hadn't realized this wasn't revenge. It was a response, a mirror, a consequence. I typed slowly, deliberately. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I just responded. And then I turned off my phone. There was a quiet relief in that moment, something weightless, like unclenching a fist you didn't know you'd been holding. I didn't expect closure from him. I didn't want it. The closure came from the choices I made, from the control I reclaimed, from knowing I never stooped to his level. While he unraveled, I had already moved on, in heart, in mind, in purpose. All that remained now was the next chapter, one that didn't include him. Weeks later, I accepted an offer from a competing firm, more flexibility, better pay, and most importantly, respect. The VP herself had given me the glowing referral. "They'd be lucky to have you," she said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Not because I needed validation, but because I'd earned it. I'd survived a betrayal, yes. But more than that, I'd proven something to myself. That I could rise, even when someone tried to pull me under. On my last day at the company, I took one final walk through the building. Not out of nostalgia, but as a quiet goodbye to the version of me who used to shrink herself. I passed familiar desks, nodded to old teammates, held the door open for someone who never learned my name. I wasn't sad. I wasn't bitter. I was ready. This place had been part of my story, but it wasn't where it ended. I was choosing what came next. As I stepped outside, the air felt different. Cleaner somehow. Lighter. I paused at the edge of the plaza, glancing back one last time. That's when I saw him. Ryan. Leaning against the wall near the loading dock, cigarette in hand. He looked tired, hollow. There was a slump to his shoulders I didn't recognize. Stress clung to him like smoke. For a second, he looked up, our eyes met. And I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Regret. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't say a word. I just gave him a polite smile, the kind you offer a stranger on a train. And then I walked on. Not because I was trying to be cruel, but because I had nothing left to say. He'd already heard everything he needed to hear the day his world began to crack from the inside. I wasn't his lesson. I was just the result of his choices catching up. As I walked away, the wind picked up, carrying the faintest trace of my perfume, the one he used to call irresistible. I wore it deliberately that day, not for him, but for me. It reminded me of who I was before all the lies. A scent tied to dinners where we used to laugh, to mornings when I still believed his promises. Funny how something so soft could carry so much strength. He inhaled, and I knew he recognized it. That was enough. I didn't need revenge. I needed release. And I had it. I had my peace, my new job, my pride intact. While he remained behind, trying to pick up the pieces of the mess he created, I was already miles ahead. Not in distance, but in growth, in freedom, in clarity. This wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the end of who I used to be when I accepted less than I deserved. And as I disappeared into the city crowd, head high, heels clicking like punctuation marks on the pavement, I realized something. You don't always need to burn bridges. Sometimes the best response is to rebuild a new path so strong, so radiant, that they have no choice but to watch you walk it, without them.